Hello there and welcome. In this episode, we're finally going to continue with other things. We spent a few episodes on the resource gathering system. So in this episode, we want to have an option to generate or train units from the UI because we can generate buildings, but we cannot generate units. We have our unit that we created before. We also have the harvester, but we don't have an option to create these units and to basically buy them. So if we expand our UI and this side panel, we have our buying system and we have two buttons here, the buildings button and the units button. So when we click on the buildings button, it will simply display this section over here with the buildings. If we click on the units button, then it will disable the buildings area and it will enable the units area. So it's basically the same thing, but this one has buttons for buildings and this one has buttons for units. Now I changed this to infantry because previously we just copied one of these, so I did not do anything new. I simply renamed this to infantry, and I also set the different sprites, but I'm going to show you exactly what I did. This is something we had previously. We have this on each one of our buy slots, right? Each one of our buy slots, even the buildings has this. We have an image and then we have a button. We have an on-click that will basically trigger something from the buy slot. And we have these available and unavailable sprites. We have a reference to the buy system, and we also have the database item ID. So this is not new, we already did this, and each item has its own sprites and its own database ID. So with the infantry, and for each unit, we're going to have the same setup, but we're going to have a different database ID. We're going to have a different sprite. You can see this one, and we also have this one, which is the unavailable sprite. And all the rest will basically be the same. We can also change the default sprite that will appear over here. Okay, this one. Now, of course, we're going to add more units later. We want to have harvesters. You can also make it much more complex. You can split this into units like humans, but you can also create units like tanks and harvesters, so mechanized units. Maybe you can have other buttons here that will split this and you can have different tabs for different units. But this is really up to you. It's really about the style of your game. We are going to have all the units inside this units tab and all the buildings inside the buildings tab. But it's very simple. If you want to have some kind of separation, just create more sections and then have buttons that will trigger these sections. So we are going to start with a simple unit, and this will be our infantry unit that we previously created, right? It's this unit that we have a model and that we can basically do anything we want with. So we want to be able to generate it from the UI instead of having it in the scene like this. So we are going to click on this infantry, and the first thing we want to do is add him into our database. Now again, it's not really a database. It's just this scriptable object that we name database, and it contains information about all of our buildings and units. And although this contains buildings, we should also add our units here because we can store all kind of information. For example, the resources required, the dependencies, the database ID, descriptions, things like that. So we're simply going to add another item. We're going to rename it to infantry unit. And we're going to change the ID. This is important. So if the first one is 0, the second one is 1, the third one is 2, then the fourth one will be 3. Now we're going to set the building type to none because this time it's not a building, and this is important. We're going to remove the size to 0, 0 because we use this for building buildings. This is not relevant for units. The prefab here is also not relevant for units because we are using it to instantiate the buildings. We're going to instantiate the units in a different way, so we can simply set this to none, or maybe we can just leave it as it is. We're not going to use this part of code, so let's just set it to none, okay? And now we're going to set some requirements. So what will cost us to generate this unit? We obviously can add more resources because we have other ones. We can have credits, but if you remember, we removed credits from our game. In the previous episode, we only have resources, so we have gold and oil. So let's say we need 25 gold to generate this unit. Then we also want to have a dependency, and the only dependency for this unit will be the command center. So only when we have a command center, this unit will even be available for construction or for training. For example, when we are going to create the harvester, right? We want to have extra harvesters, then we're going to set the dependency to be the supply center because there is no point to create a harvester without a supply center. So again, let's go over this. This ID should be increased. So depending on how many items you have here, building type will be none. All of this is not relevant. Requirements, what is needed to construct this unit, and dependency. And this is what we need for now. So remember that this ID, this item ID is 3. So now let's go to our infantry button, to this buy slot, and we need to make sure this is 3 as well. So when you create more and more units, just make sure that the database item ID on the buy slot is the same as the one in the database. Because we're basically going to click on the button and this will know which unit to generate, okay? Now we need to do a few changes inside of this database object script because we need to add a few more things. So let's just double click on it. Inside of the objects database scriptable object, we're going to add another enum because we have different building types. But what about unit types? So we're just going to copy this and we're going to rename this to unit type. And we're going to have a few units. First of all, let's make sure we also have a none one because buildings will still require some kind of unit type and we're going to set them to none. Then we're going to have infantry unit. We're going to have a harvester and you can add more and more, but we're going to do this later. As I told you, you can split up the different unit types. For example, tanks and harvesters will be on one tab and actual humans will be on a different tab, but this is up to you. Still, all the units will be together. So we have the infantry unit and the harvester. Then we also want to add this into the actual object data. So over here, we're going to copy this and we're going to rename this to this unit type and also change this to unit type enum. So this is another property that will now be required for each item. We're going to save, and when everything is compiled, we're going to see it over here. So now we have another option, this unit type. Obviously for the buildings, this should remain none, but for our units, we're going to set the this unit type to the actual unit, infantry unit. Before we continue, I just want to make sure that the UI is working correctly for you. Although we did create all of this previously, just make sure that you can click on these buttons and that the tabs will switch. And also the dependency should work. So if you don't have a command center, the unit should not appear, okay? So let's just enable the buildings, disable the units, and run the game. And I just want you to check if everything is working. So at this point, you should only see the command center because the other buildings have a dependency on the command center. If we click on the units tab, it should be empty, because our unit has a dependency on the command center, therefore we cannot build it. So only when we build the command center And also make sure it's actually working and these ones are enabled and disabled. When we construct the command center, then these ones are available and also our unit is available. Obviously, we cannot click on it, it will not work. But just make sure that everything is working like this at this point. Now, because we are building our buildings using the placement system, right? We place the buildings on the map using the grid, and we do all of this inside the building system with the placement system and the grid. We are not doing the same thing for the units. Obviously, for the units, we simply want to instantiate them next to the building. So we're going to create a different system to generate units or to train units. We're going to use our bind system for this. So we're going to open the buy system script, and at this point it's very short. We only activate the UI and we basically switch between tabs. So this is the only purpose of the buy system. That's why we want to add the code here and basically train units inside of this script. First of all, we need a reference to our actual database, because previously we had a reference to the database inside of the construction system, right, when we wanted to construct a building, but now we also need a reference here inside the buy system. So we're going to have a serialized field just to make it private, so it's not accessible from other parts of the code, but we still want to see it inside the inspector. So object database, and I see this typo here. I do this a lot. I misspell things. So, well, let's just do this. Okay, but never change names like this. Never go here and add a character, because it will not change it for the actual script. It will not change it for other things. Always right click and rename. So database. Now it will change this, but it will also change all the scripts. So now we have a reference to the database, and we also want to create a method that will basically check if we are trying to construct a building or to train a unit. Now, in order to organize the script a bit, we're going to add all of this into a region. I don't remember if I talked about regions. A region is just a way to organize our scripts. We can use this sign and type region, and then we can give it some kind of name, UI related, and then we need to close the region. So basically go over here when we want to end the region and type in end region. So now we have this section here that we can basically collapse. And the code is still inside of the script, but it is not messy, and we can separate different code depending on the topic. Obviously, the best practice is to have only related code inside of a script, but sometimes you have big systems like the buy system, and you have a lot of code inside. So although this is all related to the buy system, you still want to organize it a bit, so you can use these regions. And this way you can make everything look much better. So now we can create another region for the unit training. And we can also add this end region, and we're simply going to add the code inside. Okay, so this can be collapsed, and we're going to write the code inside. Training. So the first method we need is one that will check if the item that we try to construct is a building. So we're going to have a public bool because it's going to return true or false. And it's going to be named something like is database or is item a building. You can also say is database item a building. And then inside we're going to receive the item ID. And we're basically going to check if this item is a building or not. And we can do this by simply going into the database because we have a reference, get object by ID because we also have this method inside of our database, remember? And we're going to provide the item ID, and then we're going to check if this is a building type. If it's not a building type, building none, right? Because each object, each item inside of the database is an object data, and each object data has all of these properties, and it also has this is building type and is unit type. So we can simply get this and then check if it's not none. If it's not none, it means that it's a building, right? If it's none, then it's not a building. And then we simply return it. Okay, so by saying if it's not none, it means that it is a building. Okay, so this is just a helper method, and now we're going to add a few more methods. So we want to be able to click on the actual slot and then check if it's a building or not. And we do this inside the by slot itself, right? Because inside the by slot, we have the logic to basically deal with building our buildings to start the placement. So when we click on our UI, for example, on the command center, then we click on this by slot and then we use this by slot click on slot method on click. So we basically run this method and we start the placement. But now we are going to have both buildings and units. This will not work for units. This will only work for buildings. So we need to expand this method and add an option to actually train units. So for this, we're going to do another check here. And we're going to use our by system, because we have a reference here, is database item a building. So this is the method we just created. We're going to provide it with the actual database item ID because we have this on the by slot. And if this will return true, it means that this is a building. Then we're going to run this. Else, it means that we clicked on a unit. And then we're going to do something else. For this, we're going to create a method inside of the by system named start unit training. And we also want to provide the database item ID. Now we still don't have this method, so we can either create it directly inside the by system, or we can just hover, generate method, and then it will directly create this method inside of the by system. So inside the by system, we should be able to see, okay, it created this inside of the region. So let's just take it out of this region and place it into this region. So it created this method, and now we can add the code inside. So here we simply want to first check which item or which unit it is, and then we're going to instantiate it. So object data, because this is our database objects, unit to train, database get object by ID. This is the auto completion that I have. This is just something that comes with Visual Studio, but we're taking the database, we get the object by ID, and we use our database item ID. And then it's going to keep a reference here inside the object data. And then we check if the unit to train this unit type is none. So if for some reason we got here and it is still none, then we should throw an error because this should not happen. And it means that we simply forgot to set a unit type. Okay, it simply means that you forgot to set the unit type over here, okay? It will probably be none. You will try to click on the unit, but it will see none. So always make sure this is updated. And if it has a unit type, then it will simply start with the instantiation. So instantiate unit. Instantiate unit, and we're going to take our unit to train and we're going to use its name. Now we want to use the name of the unit because the unit to train has this property inside, right? It has a name. And the name will be the name that we have over here inside of the database. So it will look for this unit and it will try to instantiate it. So make sure this name is exactly the same name as your prefab, and the prefab should go into the resources folder. But before we get there, let's just generate this method, instantiate unit, and we provide the name. Obviously, you can provide the entire unit and then get the name here, it doesn't matter. But we only need the name for now, so we only pass in the name. And inside, we're going to instantiate the unit. Now, where are we going to instantiate the unit? Obviously, if we have a command center, we want to instantiate the unit next to the command center. Now, you can make it much more complex. For example, if the unit requires a barracks or something, you can instantiate the unit next to the barracks. If you instantiate a harvester, you can make it appear next to the supply center. We are going to make it rather simple. We're going to instantiate all the units next to the command center because the command center is the dependency for most of our units. Many RTS games also do it. It doesn't matter which kind of unit you build, they will be constructed and appear next to the command center or maybe the town center. So that's what we're going to do. But first we need to find this command center, right? We cannot add a reference to the command center here inside the buy system because we don't have a command center when we start the game. We only create a command center later on. That's why we cannot have a reference here. We need to find the command center differently. And for this, we're going to use find objects of type. This is a built-in method that comes with Unity that basically looks for a specific object inside of the entire scene. So we're going to look for a constructible because our command center is a constructible. But we're going to have many different constructibles, so we first need to gather all of these constructibles. And we can find all of them using this find objects of type constructible. Now it's going to look for this type of object inside of the scene and place it here. So find object, okay, so we need find objects. We have find object if we want one object, but if we have multiple items, we should say find objects because we try to store it inside of an array. So it's going to find all the constructibles inside the scene, right? If we have a command center, it has this constructible script, but if we have a power plant, it also has a constructible script. If we have a supply center, it also has this constructible script. So it's going to find all of these objects inside of our scene and store them here. And only then we want to actually find our command center. So constructible, for now it's going to be null. And we don't really care about all the command centers, right? Because we can build a lot of command centers. We only want to find one command center. So we're going to do a for each and basically loop and check for the first command center that we find. So var c in all constructibles, we loop over this array, and if C building type is a command center, then we're going to set our command center reference to be C. C is just constructible, and we're going to break from this loop because we don't want to look for anything else. We found our command center, so we're going to break from this entire loop. And now, if for some reason we did not find a command center, then we're just going to give an error, but this should not happen because there is no way we can actually get to this point if we don't have a command center, right? If our command center was destroyed, then we should not even be allowed to generate or train a unit because all of our units are going to be dependent on the command center. But anyway, if for some reason this happens, we should know what is the problem. It's good to add these debugs. So log warning, no command center found. And this should not happen. Okay, this should not even happen, but it's good to have this warning here. And now we actually want to instantiate our unit, right, next to the command center. Now, if you want to instantiate different units next to different buildings, you can look for other buildings. For example, you can say if the name is harvester, then look for a supply center and then instantiate the unit next to the supply center. We want to instantiate all of them next to the command center, so that's why we do this, but you can change the code if you want. So now we want to instantiate the item or the actual unit. So over here, let's just find our unit. So what are we doing here? First of all, we are loading the actual prefab from our resources folder, right? Because we're going to place our prefabs into this folder, and we're looking for an object with this name. So we can also rename this to unit name. Then we're going to check if it actually found a prefab. If it did not found a prefab, probably the name that we have inside the resource folder for the actual unit is not the same as the one that we have here. So make sure that if here we have infantry unit, our unit actually has the same name. So I renamed this to infantry unit. I don't remember if we did this together, but I simply renamed this to infantry unit because here it's also infantry unit. So rename your actual unit to have the same exact name. Save all the changes for the prefab, and then drag this prefab into the resources folder. Now, we have this as a prefab inside of our prefabs folder, but we can just drag this one, okay, because it's the same one. So let's just drag it into the, let's drag the unit into the resources folder. And now we have our infantry unit inside the resources folder. I don't remember what is this. I think it's the basic unit we created previously. We don't really need this. So let's just delete this. And I hope it's not going to cause us any issues. So we have the harvester and we have the infantry unit inside of the resources folder, okay? And now it's going to basically look for this name, infantry unit, and it's going to look inside the resources folder and it's going to instantiate our unit. Same way, you're going to do this for the harvester. So if it's not going to find the unit, it's going to give us this warning. But if it did find it, it's going to set the position. So it's going to take the command center as the spawn point, but it's also going to add some kind of offset because obviously we don't want it to be spawned in the middle of our command center. We want it to be spawned next to the command center. And then I played around with the positioning so it will appear next to the entrance. Obviously, if you have other models, you should play around with these values. And then I'm going to take the spawn position and provide it here to actually instantiate the unit, prefab in this position, and then we use quaternion identity to keep the rotation the same way it is on the prefab. And that's it. Now we don't have to add a reference to the new unit. We can simply do this, but maybe later we want to do something with this unit, so it doesn't hurt to keep a reference here. And now this should work. Okay, so this is the entire method, so you can take a look at it. Now at this point, if I'm not forgetting anything and everything is saved, it should actually work. Okay, so we are going to let it compile. We're going to run the game. And we can still keep this one here, but now we can construct a command center. Oh, obviously, yes, something is missing. See, database. Oh, yeah. We added a reference to the database, but we never actually added the reference. So inside the bind system, we need a reference to the database. Again, I keep calling it database, although it's not really a database. So just drag the database scriptable object into the reference here. So now let's run this. And now we're going to construct our command center. And now this option will be available. When we click on it, the unit is instantiated next to the command center. And because I played with the offset here with these values, it got instantiated here at the entrance. If you have another model that is pointing to this direction, you can change the value so it will instantiate here or here. You can even create an animation that the unit runs out of it, but this is something that is very specific because many games don't have this. The unit simply appears, other games have it. If you want your game to look much better, if you want your game to be much more appealing, then you can create this animation, basically a simple animation where the unit is instantiated in the middle of the command center, but then runs to this position. Maybe later we are going to do this together, but it's not very important. So for now, we're not going to do this. But we're simply instantiating the unit here. So at this point, we can add many more units and we can instantiate them. But obviously, this does not look very good. What about having a delay, right? Because most RTS games have some kind of delay before the unit is constructed. We don't want to just keep constructing these units. We want to wait some time. We also want to have some kind of animation for the training. So we're going to deal with all of this. So first of all, we're going to add some kind of delay before we train the unit. So over here inside the by system, before we train the unit, we want to add a delay. And the way we can add a delay is by turning this into a coroutine. So I enumerator. And we are going to add this delay, yield return, new, wait 4 seconds, and we're going to provide a training time, okay? So float training time, because maybe some units will have longer training times, other units not. you can even have some kind of tech tree that will improve the training time. So if you improve some kind of technology in this tech tree, then the training time will be lowered. You can do whatever you want, but we're going to provide a training time, and this will add a delay, and only after the delay is over, the unit will be instantiated. So at this point, there will be a delay, okay? But we also want to add this training time delay inside of our by slot, because each slot will have its own training time. So public float training time, and we're going to start with 5. And obviously you can set this to something else for each kind of unit inside of the inspector. Now we need to actually provide it. So over here, we cannot just call this method like this because it's a coroutine. So we're going to start a coroutine, and the coroutine is this coroutine. And we also need to add the training time. So it will basically start the coroutine, but it will start it from the by slot and not from the by system. Now, this is not something we're going to keep for a long time, because later, if we switch our building tab or our units tab, the entire tab will be disabled. But if we start a coroutine from the by slot and the by slot will get deactivated, the coroutine will just stop. This is how it works in Unity. The coroutine will not run if the actual by slot is disabled. But you can see here that if we click on the build or the buildings button, then this entire area will be disabled. It means that our by slot will be disabled as well. And because we start our coroutine from the by slot, then the coroutine is basically living inside the by slot. So this is not good, but later we're going to fix this. And for now, we want to add some kind of animation, because if we click on the unit, it will wait 5 seconds, right? It will wait 5 seconds, and the player will not understand why the unit is not constructed. So we need to create some kind of visual indication for the unit. And most RTS games have some kind of progress bar or maybe some kind of visual way to know that the training is in progress. We're going to do this for the units, and later we're going to do this for the buildings as well. So to do this, we're going to have a script that will basically take care of this animation. We're going to create a new script, and we're going to name it build slot progress. And I'm going to add the code, and then I'm going to explain it. So this will be on our by slot. It will actually be on an image that is a child of the by slot, and this image will be the actual animation. It will run in this clockwise direction like in RTS games, and it will start at 1, but then as long as the progress continues, it will basically get smaller and smaller, and it will eventually get to 0. So we have the actual image. It will be a simple sprite. We have some counters and a bool. When we start the building, we're going to provide the actual time for the building. It's going to set the time to the build time. We're going to start the start time by getting the actual time. So we don't want to create some kind of local counter. We want to use our global time. This way, it doesn't matter if we move to another tab or something like that, it will still keep track of the building time. Then we also want to use this bool, and we want to start with a full sprite, and then we're going to enable it. And as long as it's building, right? If it's not building, so simply return, but as long as it's building, we're going to reduce the start time from the actual global time, and we're going to know how much time has passed. Then we're going to divide the pass time by the build time, and we're going to know the progress percentage. And we're going to set the progress to the actual sprite. And then if it's actually ended, so if the build time is bigger than, or the elapsed time is bigger than the build time, it means that we are done with this animation. So we're going to set this to 0, we're going to set is building to false, and we're going to call this on complete building or on build complete. We can do different things here. This is just so we know that the build is complete. We don't need to do anything here right now. So now we have this entire script. Make sure you have this exactly the same way. And we're going to add this on our actual UI. Now, before this, we want to trigger it when we click on the slot. So inside the by slot, when we click on the slot, we want to start this thing. So first we need a reference. So inside the by slot, add a reference to the script. Public build slot progress, build slot progress. And when we click on the UI, we're going to take this and we're going to start building because we have this method inside, and we need to provide with the actual time. So the time is the same as the training time, right? Because each by slot will have its own training time, and we want to use it for the animation, but also for actually training the unit. Okay, just so it's clear. So we're going to save this, and now we're going to add this into the actual UI. So we need to do this for each unit. I'm going to show you how to do this for the infantry, but later we're going to do this for all the other units. Obviously, we also need to modify the code so it will work with the buildings because we don't have a delay, right? So for our different units, we're going to click on the infantry and we're going to add a UI image as a child. So it will cover the entire area. We're going to click on it. We're going to click here, hold Alt and stretch it so it will cover the entire area. And now we can add a sprite. So it can be some kind of simple training sprite. So it's just this square. And then we're going to set the material and color, so maybe this kind of red. And the alpha should be a bit transparent so we can see the actual unit. And it will start from this, but then it's going to basically start getting smaller and smaller. So we're going to rename this to progress. And we're going to set these values here. Now, if you don't add a sprite, if it's none, you're not going to have these options. So you must have some kind of sprite. And then you're going to have these options here. So we're going to change the image type to filled. And then we're going to have this option, radial 360. So this will allow us to basically reduce it like this. Now we can also change the direction. So we're going to set it to top, so it will start from the top. And we also want to change the direction. So we don't want this to be like that. We want it to start from the right side, so we can unselect clockwise. And now it will start at 1, right? Because in the code, it starts at 1, and then it goes all the way to 0. So here it will start at 1 and it will go all the way to 0, and you can see This is the same way it looks in Red Alert 2, exactly the same way, okay? It goes this direction, and eventually it will generate the unit. So make sure that you have all of this, and now the most important thing is to actually add the script on this image. So build slot progress should be on this image, and we can drag the reference for this image. Obviously, you can also get the reference from within the script. So make sure that we have this here, and we also need this reference inside of our actual slot. So click on the infantry slot and add this progress into this reference. Now we also need to disable this because it should be disabled at first. And when we click on this unit, it's going to enable it and it's going to start the animation, and then it's going to disable it again. So we're going to do this for every one of our units, and eventually we're going to do this for the buildings as well. Now, the last thing I want to do in this episode before we actually test this is to add some sound so the player will actually get notified when certain actions are taking place. For now, we have sounds for the unit selected or the unit walking, but we also want to add some feedbacks from the UI. So I created these sounds for generic RTS sounds, and you can use whatever you want. I just created them using 11 Labs. 11 Labs is a website that uses AI to generate basically text to speech. It's very good. You can use it for free, but you have a limit of characters, or you can pay and then you can use many more characters. By characters, I mean the actual words that you can generate. So I created several sounds and we're going to use them. So for this, we're going to open our sound manager and we're going to add a section here for the commander. Commander is just the person that is going to say this. And we're going to have a private audio source. And we're going to have all of these clips. So private or public audio clip. We're going to have unit ready clip. We're going to have several more. Unit ready. We have construction completed. We have training and we have building. We're going to add some of these in the next episode when we deal with the actual buildings. For now, we're just going to use a few of them. But we need to instantiate the audio source like we did here when we start the game. So we're going to basically just add an audio source dynamically on our sound manager using this add component. And we're going to use this commander channel, and then we're going to add a few methods to just play the sounds. So play unit ready sound. And we're going to use our commander channel. You can add null checks to see if you have everything assigned, but we're just going to make it simple without null checks. We're going to play the unit ready clip. Okay, commander channel, unit ready clip. And we're going to do this for all the rest. So we have 4. Now don't get confused between this building sound and the ones that we had before for the construction, which are just sound effects when we build different buildings, right? These ones are just construction sounds, but these ones are actually voiceovers. So now we have all of these methods and we're going to add them where we need to. So for the training, we're just going to copy this and we're going to enter into our by slot, and we can do this here, right? Sound manager instance, training sound. Then for the building, we can add it here, right? But we still don't have a delay, so we're going to do this later. For the, let's see what we have. Training sound, building sound, unit ready sound. So unit ready sound will go when we actually finish building the unit. So when we click, it's going to start training. And then when we go into our start unit training and we actually instantiate the unit over here at the end, we're going to say sound manager instance play unit ready sound. And it will basically play this sound when we finally instantiate the unit. So now everything is saved. We're going to use both of these sounds for the building sounds. This one and this one, we're going to add them in the next episode when we add a delay and an animation for the buildings, right? Because the buildings are working a bit differently. We first want to click on the building to start the training, and only then it will say building ready. And only then we are going to click a second time to actually place the building. So it's a bit different. We're going to do this in the next episode. So now let's add references to our clips. So sound manager. Obviously, I cannot provide you with these sounds because I created them using my own license for 11 Labs, but you can generate them for free. I'm going to add a link for 11 Labs so you can check it out. So training, unit ready, construction, and building. Now I hope I did not forget any kind of reference. You can change the training time here. So let's just make sure that our units are disabled and our buildings are enabled, because this is like the first thing that is going to appear. And we also want to remove the infantry unit from the scene, because now we're only going to generate them using the UI. So again, make sure the prefab is applied and saved and just remove it from the scene. So now we can run this. So now if we go to our units page, we cannot see any units because they're dependent on the command center. But once we build the command center, we can see the units. And now when we click on it,
training.
What happened?
Unit ready.
Let me see. Enabled. Oh, yeah, I did a small mistake. We are not enabling it from the code. So over here, I told you that you should disable it. This is false. Don't disable it. Make it visible, but make sure that it is set to 0 at the beginning. Only inside the code, it will automatically first set it to 1 and then it will reduce it, okay? So don't disable it. It should be enabled and it should be 0 at the start. This was the issue. And now we can disable the units. We can keep this. And now let's see if it's working.
Training. Unit ready.
Yes, sir. Of course.
And now we can generate more and more units.
Unit ready.
Reporting.
Obviously, there are many small bugs that we're going to encounter at this point. So we're going to fix them in the next episode. So if you're going to encounter them, don't worry. For example, if we click on the unit and then we switch to a different tab and we come back, you can see that it's not going to generate anything because the coroutine basically stopped. And that's what I was talking about before. And we can also double click on it and it will not actually generate more units. It's just a bug. You can see it's just a bug, so we also want to
Unit.
disable the interaction if the unit is building, and only later we're going to create some kind of queue to create multiple units. So there are a lot of bugs at this point, but it will work. And in the next episode, we're going to take care of some of these bugs. Again, eventually you will stumble upon more bugs that I probably did not cover, and you will have to handle them because I can't possibly find all of these bugs. But I'm going to show you the ones that I can help you with. And another thing we're going to do in the next episode is just add this kind of animation to our buildings. And when the animation is done, it will obviously not spawn the building, but it will say building ready, and then we can click a second time on the building and actually place it. So we're going to do all of this in the next episode. Also, we still don't reduce resources when we build our unit, right? The resources are not decreased, so we're going to do this as well in the next episode. So that's all for this episode. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe if you're still not a subscriber. You can also leave a like, you can leave a comment, and you can also become a member of the channel to get access to our Discord server. So there you can ask me personal questions, you can get help from the community and also from me, so you can consider becoming a member of the channel. So that's all, and I'll see you next time.